Hey, good evening, guys. Thanks for coming along tonight again. This is our second investment webinar that we've had in, I don't know, what has it been, Rupert? A month? Maybe last month? No, a couple of months, yeah. After a bit of a disaster. Sorry, Daniel?
I said time flies.
Yeah, the last one was a little bit of a disaster in the platform that we were using, so we thought we would give it another go and hopefully allow for some questions, a few more questions, which we couldn't do last time very well. So, hey, we'll just have a quick around the room, maybe a new introduction for everybody. So, hey, I'm Brett Davies from the Mortgage Lab based in Auckland. Maybe we could kick off with you, Rupert, start with you and we'll walk around and get you guys to a bit of an intro.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, I'm Rupert Goff. I'm CEO of Mortgage Lab. I started Mortgage Lab about 6 years ago, and I also do a bit of articles for One Roof, weekly article for One Roof, and also I've got a couple of articles elsewhere and things. So, yeah, that's basically me.
Daniel Carney.
Hey, my name's Daniel Carney. I'm the owner of Good Life Financial Advice. I'm a financial advisor. We've been advising clients for about 23 years. And a lot of those clients are residential investment property clients. But we do have quite a significant funds under management client base as well. So, we're interested in helping people to grow and protect their wealth and hopefully to get to a point in their life where they're financially independent. I don't write an article every week for anybody, except for myself. So, yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Daniel. Gareth.
So I'm Gareth Collard, the principal at epsomtex.com. We're investment accountants. The company was founded in 2008. So really, probably over the last 10 years, we've been specialising in property, and more recently, we've talked more about things like managed funds and crypto, as well as interest has increased in that. Yeah, for some funky videos of me, check out TikTok. Yeah, I'm probably not the oldest person on TikTok, but perhaps almost. But pretty excited to be re-looking at this whole subject again tonight, because strangely enough, in a short time, quite a lot has changed.
Thanks. So we thought we'd keep it a similar format as what we did last time, with the same sort of questions, because they're all kind of relevant. What's changed in the investment property market in the last 12 months? What are things going to look like in the next 12 months? And then what should be considered when buying an investment property at the moment? And I'm sure we'll digress from there, but I don't know, Rupert, why don't you kick it off and tell us a little bit about triple CFA, because that's lightened up a little bit, slightly, which has made our lending jobs a little slightly easier, but not dramatically.
Yeah. Look, I get the easy one. I think the easy answer for this question, because so much has changed in the past 12 months. The triple CFA came in, and technically on the 1st of December last year, but was actually implemented by about September by the banks, trying to show that they were, all ready for it. So from September, lending became significantly harder, and you will notice, if you look at the volumes of mortgages, if you're boring like I am and look at that kind of thing, that the volume of mortgages dropped off a cliff in around December, which is about the lag time from the pre-approvals that came through in September. And to give you an idea of that, in that sort of December time, the banks were receiving applications from advisors who had done their filter and considered what was achievable and sent it into the bank. 70% of those applications were declined by the bank. So you can't understate how much of a effect the triple CFA had. And now, when did it turn around, Brett? It might have been July. It might have been May that they officially lightened up on the triple CFA requirements. The banks weren't overly happy with the changes and had kind of implemented some of those changes already. And we're talking about how you treat things like discretionary items like, well, the avocado on toast or the famous Kmart expenses, right? So how were they treating those? Because the way that they've always done mortgages, always in the past 5 years, done mortgages was, look, we understand that you buy coffees, we understand that you buy avocado on toast. When you're a house owner, when you've bought an investment property and times are tight, we understand that you will cut down on these expenses in order to pay your mortgage. And that was 99.9% of the population proved that was indeed the case. People prioritized paying their mortgage. The triple CFA had a requirement that they had to forecast the last 3 months of expenses going forward. In other words, people weren't going to stop having coffee; they were just going to stop paying their mortgage, which is obviously ridiculous. And so that's what brought a grinding halt to the market. Now, the banks are much more rational now. It's not the bank's fault, by the way, it's the regulations on them. The banks are able to take a much more rational approach to lending now. So we're almost back to, okay, if you can show us that you've got a reasonable budget, that you haven't got fixed expenses that are going to cause you problems, then we'll look at that budget. That's just happened in the past month or two, so that's quite an exciting time, and I think you'll see a bit of a turnaround in terms of lending for that. I don't know if this is in the past 12 months now, but LVR changes happened, so 60% for investment property max, which obviously requires a lot more equity or deposit from borrowers. Now, people who have owned houses for a few years had a stack of equity because they all grew by 30% for 1 year, but you need 40% of equity in your current property or cash to buy an investment property, except for new build properties. And I suspect that both Daniel and Gareth are going to talk about new build properties, because the benefits of buying a new build for an investment property cannot be understated, and both the lending, the ongoing benefits of maintenance and tax, and just really the huge number of bank policies that changed. And of course, in the past 12 months, interest rates have gone from 2.2% to 5.19 lately. They went up to 5.35, came back to 5.19. But again, if you're buying new build and you go to the right bank, you might get as low as 3.5, 3.6% on a floating rate, or a heap of additional cash. So lots of changes in the lending scene. That the landscape of borrowing compared to the last year has changed significantly. But I guess the point, and this will probably get into what the next 12 months looks like, is if you can borrow at the moment, you're also not up against 30 other people at the open home or the show home. You're only up against one or two, so kind of a good thing there. But that's kind of, from the lending perspective, that's what has happened in the past 12 months.
Thanks. So, Gareth, there's still a lot to think about in the tax side of things for investors, right? So maybe we could have a little bit of an overview of the changes that you've seen in the last 12 months, changes that are going on at the moment or coming, maybe, well, we'll talk about the future later, but what's your take at the moment?
Yeah, so what are we now, July 2022? Probably what we're starting to see is the effects of the changes that were announced in March 2021, that people getting the tax returns done, the financial statements prepared and the tax returns done now for their rental properties, they're now starting to see that. Oh, okay, so for example, last year, from October onwards, you could claim you could deduct 75% of your interest, and the other 25% is non-deductible interest. This is for existing rentals. So now we're seeing the first time financial statements showing that here's your entry for interest that's deductible and interest that's non-deductible. So what's next year going to look like, FY23? That's the year we're currently in, and so forth. So now that's sort of hitting the market, and our discussions have continued to be along the lines of, well, look, have you got some losses? Quite often, if you had worked with a financial advisor, you would have had some losses on paper from your rental. In other words, the expenses were more than the income. Those expenses weren't necessarily things that you had to pull out of your pocket. Some of them would be costs like wear and tear, aka depreciation on chattels. But if you'd had something well structured like that, generally you're going to have a rental property or portfolio that's insulated against these changes for a couple of years. So that's kind of starting to kick in. The new build thing, pretty much like always, lots of people want new builds. We've seen that same issue of what Rupert was just addressing before, about the difficulty in getting borrowing. Sometimes that it has to be pushed out a bit. We need another bit more time. We need to go to another bank, or that sort of thing. And people are just having to be a bit more careful about the numbers, perhaps. The overall appetite, I think, in general, Daniel will comment on this, no doubt, though, hasn't changed. I was talking to an engineer yesterday, and if you're watching, you remember the phone call, and he pointed out that the numbers on property, basically from like 1066 AD to now, if you run the numbers and do plot the dips and the spikes, you basically get like a curve that just gradually goes up and up and up and up. That's property. So if you'd bought property in 1066 in England, it'd be worth a fantastic amount of money now, no doubt. Yeah, we can't be that that far back, of course, but we can do something about the future. So even though these tax changes are starting to hit in as an interest deductibility or lack of, okay, at this point, I'm just going to finish talking. Yeah.
It's not a cue. It's not a cue. We've just got an extra guest.
It's right, good.
just got an extra perspective on the market. Yeah.
She's coming to ask you if you've got her in KiwiSaver yet, so she can start saving for her first home.
So yeah, that's kind of what we're seeing. There's been no new developments, shall we say, in the last year. But what has happened is there's been clarifications of issues. We've seen IRD, under direction, of course, from Parliament, look to reduce expenses previously that people could claim. As an example of that is meals out for subbies, lunches out for subbies, food away from home. Yeah, forget that. That's only deductible perhaps if you were working on the space station or something like that. And even then it's probably doubtful. So, and we've also seen in the last few months ways to find, which is what accountants and lawyers always do, ways to still extract some tax advantages out of the system whilst keeping within the rules. So there's always ways to do that. Nothing dodgy, nice and safe, but hey, we could do this, this, and this, which will get this consequence, and then none of that is going to be tax avoidance, but it will get a desired or beneficial restructure. So that's been interesting to see that play out in discussions and webinars and scenarios, etc. And I'm talking at a professional level, i.e. the training we all have, go through continuous professional development amongst the accounting body, and particularly in this sphere of property. So what maybe 6 months ago you were told, no, it can't be done, might be worth asking again.
Gareth, what would you say the tax cost of keeping an existing investment property versus let's say they're earning, what's a reasonable amount, 40,000 a year, what's the additional cost of holding that existing investment property versus the tax benefit of buying a new build?
What's
On
the
the
additional cost? Well,
I mean, they're now taxed on that income, right? So is it effectively 30% or whatever they're taxed at?
yeah. Look, I guess you at your simplest level, if your mortgage interest was 20 grand, and for this current year you could only claim a quarter of it, so now effectively there's $5,000 more profit that has to be accounted for, and so roughly a third in tax for that. But that being said, often there might be other factors, i.e. losses from prior years, that are going to offset that fully or partially. And the other factor is, okay, so I had to pay like $1,400 tax or something, but in the big picture, this property has had a little bit of a level out. But you step back and you look at this year now, about a couple of years from now, and you go, I paid $1,400 tax, but actually the property still went up overall by several percent, or maybe 5% over the year. So in some ways, it's neither here nor there. That's easy to say, but with investments long term, so I don't think that's necessarily the game changer. Heaven forbid, I have to pay some tax. The sky is falling on me. It's like, that's the price of living in a civilized society. Step back, look at your whole portfolio and your wealth creation plan for retirement. Yeah.
So are you finding people getting rid of existing investment property to swap for new builds, or because of the tax and increased interest rate, right? So you're now paying 5.5% that you can't claim.
It's a mixture of, for some, they've come to the end of Brightline. One client was looking, and I said, look, you're out of Brightline. Do you need to sell now? You're probably better to wait till next year. This was maybe 2 months ago. You're likely to get a better price on it. So I'd probably suggest just don't hurry about that. In the big picture, you're going to get a better result. And I said, yeah, actually, you're right. That's kind of what we were thinking now that you mention it. So yes, definitely we've seen a number sell, but those ones are usually, all right, we're going to pay that off the mortgage, and now we want to get into a new build. So they're not. So that strategy is working. The government wanted people to build new houses. It's working. But by the same token, there's also others that are, I'm not too worried about the deductions. I just want to get my foot on the ladder with property, and in the big picture, okay, so be it.
So Daniel, where do you sit in all this in the last, talking about what's changed in the last 12 months?
Yeah, just in agreement with Gareth, we're not really seeing clients. I mean, it happens on an odd occasion, but we're not seeing clients just selling up older, not older, but existing properties in favor of buying new builds. So that's not been much of a change that we've seen in the last 12 months. I guess the most dramatic thing to happen in the last 12 months for our clients has been the rising interest rate environment. That's had from the beginning of the interest rate rise, when that started, we've seen probably about a $200 to $300 a week out of pocket change in what that would cost a client. Back in the good old days of 2020 or earlier, or when the interest rates were really low, pretty much everything we were looking at with our clients was a positively geared property, as in it was actually cash flow positive. Now everything's negatively geared. So, and I will probably talk about this in terms of, maybe capping out on where interest rates are going. So I don't think this is going to get any worse. But we've seen that slow increase of interest rates, which has created a greater impact on a client's bottom line. So that's been a big change, and where that's really impacted our clients is in two areas really. It's pulled back on demand big time. We talked last time about FOMO leaving the market, fear of missing out. That has accelerated since the last time we did the same subject matter only a couple of months ago. And it really intrigues me, but it's happened. And it happens because of the macro environment that clients buy into, unfortunately. So the interest rate environment has crept up, which has meant the bottom line has crept up for our clients. So it has created a big drive towards looking for higher yielding properties in the last 12 months, properties that have got a higher rental yield. To be honest, what's probably accentuated that higher yield conversation is the fact that it's harder to get your hands on lending. So, and we've got a client right now that we're working with who 2020 was it? I think maybe they were given a pre-approval in the 800s range, maybe plus, closer to $1 million. Now we're in the 600 range with them. Nothing's changed. That's all we can borrow. So people's borrowing capacities have dropped quite a bit as well, which again coincidentally brings them into a range where the yields are actually a little bit more favorable. Well, they are favorable in the kinds of areas that we're looking at. So yeah, there's been a huge total change in the last year in terms of interest rates, that the value of properties that we're looking at, the rental yields that we're looking for. FOMO is definitely gone. Last year, people were falling over themselves to get into property. This year, really, it's quite a advice pushed / driven process, as in we're guiding them in that direction. And look, I'm not saying that they're not being forced in that direction, but it is a real guided type discovery as opposed to tearing the doors down to get in. But the interesting thing, and this is what I don't think entertains is the right word, but this is what interests me so much, is that actually now should be when you are falling over yourselves to be buying. And that, I understand that. I did that with crypto, for example, was going like that, and I was piling in, and then we went, and I wasn't piling in as much. So we can go with the emotion of the markets. I understand that. It's not actually the right way to be investing, though. It really isn't, and that's where people need to be getting advice. So I really, really hope that, for me, that's a theme that is pushed out from our catch up today is please don't make your decisions based on what the masses are doing, or what the Herald headlines are saying, or what the Fed in the United States are doing. Do it based on an advice-led process with what Gareth said, stepping back and looking at the big picture. It's those people that do really, really well in life. Don't do what the masses are. Don't make your decision off what the masses are doing. Make your decision off an advice-led process by experts who understand market cycles and understand how long you need to hold things for, can show you cash flow modeling, invest in worst case environments. So yeah, that's my take on what's been happening.
Yeah, so talking. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say, I mean, it's really interesting, from a mortgage advisor side of things. Last year there was constant frustration that they turned up to open homes and there's a queue out the door, right? And the minute that queue disappears, everyone's like, wow, we're not buying then. Like, well, hang on, this is what you were dreaming of, was that you turned up, you were approved for finance, you've got that approval there, you can afford it. At no point in history has the property market, dropped by 60%. So, this is the dream time, right? No, everyone else is afraid. Yep. If you buy now and it drops by 5%, it doesn't matter because you're not flicking it.
Exactly.
This is a long-term thing, so but it's counterintuitive to the human nature, right? To feel like you're buying when no one else is. But
Totally,
yeah.
like I've never had a Ferg burger in my life. I'd like to have a Ferg burger, but every time I go there, the line is too long. And is it really that
and
good?
now,
I'm probably this is probably sacrilege what I'm saying right now, but you see that line and you want to line up and get one. If no one was lined up at that Ferg burger, would you be lining up to get one? Maybe not. So can you go around the corner and get maybe as half a good one and wait 2 minutes instead of an hour? I don't know. It's just interesting how we want to follow the masses, but maybe the masses, I don't know, in Ferg burger they might be onto something, but they may not necessarily be onto something.
Definitely are.
Yeah,
I'm missing out because I don't even know what you're talking about.
Burger, but it probably should have been.
So sorry, that was probably a bad analogy, but you know what? We see a line and we want to line up. We go with the masses. That's not. You should not apply that to investing, unless it's a good.
Can I just have a question in here? Is so I guess what's good for burgers is not good for houses, but. Because our feeling is, and maybe I'm getting into the next topic, Brett. So stop me if that's the case. That the turn is imminent or happening now. In other words, the market's gone, just sort of leveled a bit, and so not everybody, some people are holding back a bit, whereas we would tend to say, as Daniel does, it's time to jump in. I think we'll look back and say the turn was happening now, and it'll be like lemmings on a cliff. Oh, hey, the house is going. Oh, hey, our friends just bought one. Well, we better get in quick. And then it's boom, 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 and then house prices start to do that again. I guess it's that same line analogy. Oh, look, everybody's at that burger bar. Oh, well, let's go there then.
Yeah. And you can't predict that when that's going to turn, and that's the thing. No one can predict the change. A lot of people say, and I hear this too, I'll wait till happens. Well, actually, there's not going to be anyone signaling that that's going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's going to take you by surprise. No matter what you're into, whether it's the share markets, the property market, crypto, you're better just to get in if you've got a strategy and stay in. And that's always been, no matter what we're getting into with our clients, buy right, get the right advice, and just stay the course. And whenever that get in, it's always the right time, whether that's now or the market's here, there, or there. Just start the process. Just so happens we happen to be in a bottom of the market right now, so technically it's a good time to get in. But we're not about timing. It's just not our thing. Yeah.
I got to say, as a financial advisor regulated by the Financial Markets Authority, who are probably watching, hi guys, I am not at liberty to say that the market is at the bottom and turning. What I will say is that the data that we receive is 3 months old. So when we get it, you're seeing 3 months ago. And we saw that with all the OCR rises, and then inflation went up, right? Because they are measuring the past 12 months of data, not the past month of data. And I suspect that in the past few months, it's dropped off a cliff because people are starting to tighten their belts as their mortgage rates go from 2.2 to 5.3. But that's going to take a while to flow through. So if by the time you see that property is getting hot again, that data is going to be old, which is why I like to look at the mortgage volumes because that gets released. Should be any day now, if it hasn't been, for the previous month. And you'll see that it dips down. It was up at $10 billion a month. It dips down to 4.5, which is off a cliff, right? But it's back the month before last, it was 6.8 billion. So you can see it going up again. You can see those people have adjusted to, how much can we afford? Okay, well, we can afford that much, and that puts us in this price bracket. So, as you say, Daniel, it went from 800,000 to 600,000. What can we buy at 600,000? And I think if anyone could take away a message from the proposed title of this, is it still possible to buy an investment property? Is that it's not impossible. You're just going to have to adjust your expectations, right? Because those who could afford can still afford. They just might afford less unless they've boosted their income. So, yeah.
Agreed. And just get advice and get in, and don't drive your car looking in the rear vision mirror. What you've just talked about. If you drive your car looking in the rear vision mirror, you're going to have a crash. That's why looking forward, that's getting advice. So you're right. And those people I referred to before, they're of the mind now. We just need to, we waited. We just need to get in, and we need to get on that ladder and lock it in. And that's always our advice. Always, regardless of where we are in the market.
So Daniel, do you
Daniel,
see?
Daniel, I bet you've both had clients that have been approved for X amount of dollars. You know, let's say this was 3 years ago. They were going to buy 800,000, and they found one they liked for 750, but they weren't going to pay 755. So they not paying that. I'm out of the market, and today that's worth 1.2 million or something, right? So the extra $5,000 they could have paid, that's the line in the sand. They're not paying it, and and I mean, I have a rule that I never look at the value of a house I've sold because it will make me cry, I think. Yeah.
Agreed.
Sorry, Brett, I jumped in on you there.
Oh, no, button any time. So Daniel, talking about, the future, there's still a lot of opportunity out there, but especially in the new build side, which we generally deal with for investor clients. So what are you seeing opportunity out there with availability property?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I was able to borrow Gareth's time machine, and because we've been talking a lot about time and space in this, so I was able to, tap into that knowledge and use his time machine and go forward in time. No, but seriously, there's great opportunities at the moment, and thankfully, a lot of the people we work with have been listening to us in terms of, and we've been having this chat for a while now because we've been seeing all of this coming, and we knew what was going to, we knew where the OCR was going, and the banks knew where that was going. So it was, hey, look, we're going to need to have cheaper properties and good yielding. So, and also fixed prices or turnkey, so that's a theme that's been changing, and we've got some great opportunities, and because there's not the Fergburger lines, well, guess what? It's easier for us to get a better deal at the moment too. So, I have to echo what Rupert's saying. Well, I don't know if we're at the bottom of the market. I don't know that. I actually don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how high the interest rates are going to go. We just have a educated feeling about these things, or guess, or stats on these things, right? But there are some good opportunities right now, and there's some opportunity. I won't go into it, but there's some opportunities right now that I feel once we're out of this negative, the fear and greed type index, and we're more towards the fear end of the spectrum. And once we get out of that, the markets turn, the world markets turn, New Zealand's market turns. The opportunities that we're looking at, I can't see how they're not going to do very, very well for our clients. Just where they are, the price they're paying, where they're geographically located. So yeah, there are for want of a better term, there are good sales on right now. I hate that term, but that's a fact. And there's good opportunities, and new builds. We're very pro new builds. We do some existing stuff, but we're very pro new build property. And there's some good opportunities at the moment. And thankfully, as I said, the builders that we deal with have been listening, and we're just able to get our hands on good, cheap, high yielding stock in good locations. So yeah, that's what's happening.
Cool. And so, for the next 12 months, and like rental income or yields, those sort of things. What do you see there?
Yeah, just to manage people's expectations on that. with the better yielding properties that we're looking at, we probably are sitting somewhere in the $200 per week range, something like that. I'd like to hope that that's affordable for most people, but maybe it's not for some. Well, then we kind of have to sit back. It's sad to have to do that, but it is what it is. So in terms of what all of this equates to on a bottom line, net, after every man and his dog has been paid for, and I really mean that every man and his dog, the net top-up requirement at the higher end is probably somewhere in the $200 range per week top-up. However, when we, and this is where we're starting to get our crystal balls out, when we start to look at interest rates maybe coming back, and there's some fairly highly educated people talking about that very thing happening in the not too distant future. When that does turn, those bottom lines are the biggest impact to the bottom line of the calculations that we do is the interest rate environment. When they start to come down, even small amounts, you'd be surprised what that does to the bottom line. So we're getting closer and closer to these things being cash flow neutral / positive when we get into the 2024, maybe even 2023, 2024 and beyond, if interest rates do what I / probably all of you think they're going to do, and the economists, etc. Then really the toughing it out part of it, unless you can get your hands on that really sexy rate that Rupert talked about before, which you can do with one particular lender in the 3% range. If you're having to do it a little bit tough with the top up thing, which again is not a bad thing if you can afford it, it's actually a very good return on investment. That's only going to be very short lived, probably 1.5 years, and we're going to be seeing that drop. So we don't think looking beyond 1, maybe worst case 2 years fixed at the moment is a bad idea. And then maybe you're going to be in a lower environment when you come off that period, and your bottom line to top up the property is going to be even less. So the toughing it out part, I think, is going to last for another 6 to 18 months, and then we're back into party time. For the bottom line.
Awesome. Just jump in, if I may, on this. I understand that now ANZ are the only ones left that are offering this low rate, because
we weren't going to name the specific bank, Gareth.
Oh, sorry. I've run out of... Look,
it's all right.
I've got no affiliation, you see. I'm not a lender or anything, or a mortgage guy, so... All right.
It's weird. These colours, the colours on this look like the ANZ colours, actually. That's weird.
Okay. So obviously the general public that are watching this, Rupert and Brett tiptoeing carefully around, right? Yeah, good on you. Anyway, so the bank that shall not be named has run out of money. I mean, run out of government money, but the other bank who shall not be named is still doing it. But we're getting quick because that'll run out soon, probably.
There's no indication of that, actually. There's no indication that they're looking to stop that. They are the biggest slice of the pie, but they probably won't tell us either. So, to be fair,
so Rupert, I heard mid 2023. So that's probably not. Is that not?
I can't imagine they can forecast that far ahead in terms of volume. Yeah. But it is a super amazing rate, right? It's floating, let's be clear. But to get a mid threes, even on floating, when the best you can get is 5.19, it's 2%. It takes us back to the good old days. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the overall market feel, it feels a little bit like 2010 again, where kind of people are a little bit bruised from the past couple of years for a variety of reasons, and we're just coming up to see what's going on again, and it's definitely got that kind of feel about it. I mean, in terms of interest rate, I would agree with unnamed expert. Let's call him Shmoni Shmalik Shmanda, and Daniel on interest rates. They could go up. You could see a 6 sometime this year. It'll be a low 6, I think. But no one's picking 7 because if it gets to 7, the governments and the Reserve Bank are trying to beat inflation, but they've got a whole set of other problems if it gets to 7% for mortgage rates. In that, the people who bought recently weren't tested at 7% and stress tested, and so there's going to be a whole lot of issues there.
And throw in elections into that as well, in terms of what that's doing to the country.
Daniel, the Reserve Bank is independent from the government.
I'm talking about other factors, but yeah. Actually, I'd be interested to get your thoughts, Rupert. Like, how much more do you think the OCR will be hiked? I'd be interested to get your opinion on that.
Well, I mean, the forecast is mid 3s, right? And what are that? 2.5, 2.75. So, but remember that the government bills, which essentially denote how the mortgage rates are, have already factored that in. So for it to go up further, would have to point to the OCR going up more than 3.5. So it would have to be that really haven't got inflation under control. What I will say in relation to interest rates, so inflation gets under control, OCR comes down, interest rates come down. If you haven't bought in this period and property starts to take off, the Reserve Bank isn't going to want to increase interest rates. They are going to want to control the property. They're not going to want it to start going back to 30% per annum again. They're going to want to control buying and the heat in the market another way. And the way they will do that, I suspect, but I say this is not, don't take this as written, but I suspect the way they will do that is LVRs, so loan to value ratios. You're going to need more money to put in. And as you say, election year next year, they're going to do it against the investors, not the first home buyers. So
not dent to income, you don't think?
Well, potentially, although I suspect they don't actually like debt to income. I don't like it. I think it's a terrible method for measuring. They've already got these stress test servicing rates of 7%, which are effectively a debt to income ratio. But loan to value, you're going to need more money. And whether they take away that building exemption, which doesn't seem to fit with the spirit of building new houses, I suspect houses you may need 50% or more to buy an investment property. That would be my guess, because they're so conscious. Typically, in the old days, interest rates was how they did it, and they found that it was a really slow boil. Whereas LVR, they can switch on, switch off really quickly depending on the mood of the market. And again, first home buyers is kind of, because housing is such a base of the New Zealand pyramid in terms of needs, right? You got to own a house in New Zealand, you've got to own your own house. They're not going to want to switch that off as much. So I think investors, so that might be, if you're on the fence about the next couple of years, you might find it harder in the next couple of years to buy, not because of servicing, but because of the amount of cash you'll need.
Interesting. It'll be, I wonder whether that will hit new builds and investment property new builds. That'll be interesting to see. Yeah,
but of course,
I mean,
on the other hand, you do have don't buy an existing rental, buy a new build. Bring more stock into the country. But no, now we're just going to make it a bit harder for you to buy a new build. Those are sort of competing objectives, aren't they? There's obviously no easy answers, and I'm certainly glad I'm not one of the people that are trying to figure that out.
I mean, just on that note, though, if you look at the statistics, of that 6 billion that was lent out last month, only 1 billion of that was investors. Now, so they would, they're going to be trying to cool the market. It's only going to be a small portion of it. To be fair, only 1 billion of that was first home buyers. 3.8 billion of that was existing home buyers, second purchases or refinances or something. So, be interesting to see how they deal with it. But I suspect interest rates won't be how they want to deal with it.
Interesting. So Gareth, what's from a tax perspective for just going back? We probably might have covered some of this off maybe, but just for the future, the next 12 months, we've got to put up with some changes to tax, the investor tax rules.
Look, I don't foresee yet more stuff coming in. That because the existing changes have obviously been huge and had a big impact. First, it was ring fencing a couple of years ago of residential losses, and then about 18 months ago the interest deductibility phase out on existing rentals. Will there be more to come? Well, I guess the government announced the interest phase out with 2 days warning, so it's possible, but what more do they want to achieve? Certainly they're hoping to take the heat out of the market. That's happened, making it easier for first home buyers. Probably not, but there's other reasons for that. So in terms of what should current owners do, I think it's you want a bit of an idea of where things are going to look over the next couple of years. So assume that there will be no changes to the existing deductibility rules. Plan for that. If there was some sort of adjustment at a governmental level, okay, deal with that when and if that happens. But for now, we have to just deal with what is known, and that is the interest is being phased out. So it's really a time to engage, I think, with your property accountant and get an idea. All right, well, what's this going to cost me? When's it going to start costing me? How much? Is my house caught by Brightline? My rentals? What part of the country are they in? What's the market doing? Is this something where I'm better just to hold on to it? That's one side of it. The other side is, well, if I sell this now, will I be able to buy something comparable? So I think you also need to be engaging with your mortgage advisor at the same time, because it's all very well the accountant saying, you should sell up and cash up your capital gain and whatever, but then after that, all you can afford to buy is a tiny home. So, and even tiny homes are not as cheap as they used to be. So I think those are two key things, just so that your expectations are clear. Look, the accountant says this, read the numbers, but my borrowing capacity is that. Those are two competing factors. And I guess the other part of the equation is, well, where does all this fit into the long-term strategy, i.e., connect with your financial advisor about that. So, sorry, it's a long and rambling reply, but the point is, don't rush to sell. Just because, and especially now when we're in a trough, is probably the worst time to sell. Is it possible to cut back on that smashed avocado on toast a bit and hold on to your investment property until next year? Well, that's probably going to be a smarter move. Should you rush in to go, well, look, hey, we're going to make 250 grand anyway, let's just sell it? Well, that's not necessarily the magic bullet. I think you really want to take some sound advice if you're going to sell your investment property. And as a general rule, as I said, wait till next year. Just let things sort of come back to something, a different feel in the market.
Because it is really easy for us to do those calculations for clients, really simply with the systems that we have, as far as assessing for affordability based on, changing from maybe that existing property to a new build. What does that lending look like? Because it's not currently in the current test rate and what we have to deal with lending at the moment and the rules and banks policy, and that it has got a little bit harder. Not impossible, but just to do those calculations first, and give it an indicative view of the client's borrowing position, because it will be a bit different than what it was back when they bought that property a few years back or whatever it was.
Got a cool question come through.
That's funny that person just said that, because I was just about to ask.
I was going to say it before as well. Do you think the existing investors are waiting for national government to come in and change the bright line test? So, I don't know, Rupert.
Well, that would be a strange play, right? It would be nice. Oh wow, it would be nice if they did. But to wait and see, I think you put in several other factors at risk in terms of servicing and missing that rise in the market and things. I think that should be the cream on top rather than the reason for waiting and purchasing, would be my guess. Daniel, your thought?
We're definitely not seeing that. I'm not seeing that.
I tell you what, though, I have a lot of clients mention it. Oh, yeah, well, perhaps, next year this or... Well, anything's possible. That's the promise. However, let's deal with what's known at this stage. Yeah, you can't, like I said before, you can't pin your hope on a maybe.
Yeah. Gareth, I was going to ask you, because this is kind of in line with that question. The national government have alluded to the fact that they want to drop the bright line back to 2 years and make every dollar of debt tax deductible, regardless of its new build or if it's existing. Do you have an opinion on whether that could extend to, or whether it's a cash cow for them, whether it could extend to things like rewinding the ring fencing rules, or any other changes that we've seen?
Well, when the ring fencing rules, Brightline was first introduced under a national government, and then it's been extended by, Labor government since then. So it's they're not ruling out a Brightline test completely. The implementation of these things is interesting, because if there was some change at a political level and thus a change of policy there, would it apply to existing properties, or would it apply from a date going forward? There's a difference between unwinding and saying, once existing properties come out of their 10-year bright line, then they will be subject to just 2 years or something like that. So the devil is in the detail as to how that's delivered. In terms, and also I guess Brightline is one thing. Has it had much of an impact on investment? I don't believe so. 5 years, 10 years, I've had a couple of conversations this week that property would be 10-year Brightline. Oh yeah, that doesn't matter to us. Why? Because they're not looking at flicking it off. They're not looking at holding it for 5 years. They very much are, 10 years, that's the plan, which is what, Daniel, you've been talking about for years. Property is a 10-year plan at least, right? So that's interesting to hear that. So the main thing which people are interested in is the interest deductibility. The phase out is what is impacting people. And I guess that was, whoever proposed that in government said, hey, let's do this. And it went through and they said, yep, great, let's do it. It has been quite an effective tool because it gets mentioned. It has to be considered in every discussion. So whether you agree with it or not, it certainly has achieved some of that effect of a dampening for investors. So, while obviously, apolitical, sorry, politicians, but you're all the same. The main thing that should have an effect on investors is that interest deductibility, that 4-year phase out, that being changed, that would have an impact on investors.
Yeah, agreed.
I think that Brightline test was solving a problem that didn't exist. That must have been such a small portion of the market there were people that were flicking houses and they were already paying tax. There were, and the majority of other people, I mean, maybe your own home, if you're on a super kind of income trend, you were going up and you might have been updating it, but really, yeah, that wasn't a huge, it's talked about, but it wasn't a huge kind of thing, right? Yeah, it's anyway.
And interestingly, people, again, just a query today with an estate, when's Brightline? If it's still got a year to go, we'll just wait. I don't have to sell the house. Looked it up. Oh, yeah, actually, it's next year. It's no big deal. You say, oh, yeah, that's the rules. We just work around them. Or another client, yep, they sold the house. They knew it would clip Brightline, but they had this much loss and the profit was this much. So great, no problem.
Yeah. I think the biggest miracle with Brightline was that it wasn't called capital gains tax. Somehow they got everyone to call it a Brightline. It's capital gains tax.
Arose by any other name, though, eh?
It's funny. Politicians.
I just talking about whether you totally remove the Brightline or from this stage 2 months after they get into power or whatever, the Brightline has changed. I just shudder at the calculations we'll need to do. Well, if you bought between the 10th of November 2020 and the 13th of June 2023, then you'll be this. And I really hope if they do come in and scrap it, that they just scrap it rather than putting the line in the sand, or our calculators will be horrendously complicated.
I agree.
Odd dates do make it pretty hard, and unfortunately there have been a lot of sort of non-standard dates over the last few years. So yeah, that adds extra complication. It's easier to get it wrong.
We've got a little bit of it in terms of some of the banks. If you bought prior to whatever date it was the 15th of March last year or something, or 15th of March 2020 or something, then the rental is scaled by this much. And if it's after that, then it's scaled by this much because you're not paying tax on it. You're deducting interest against it. So it's already a bit of a nightmare. So yeah.
Yep. It's what happens when you rush something through and don't get anybody's opinion on it.
Triple CFA, we're looking at you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
We've pretty much come to the end of our time, but Rupert, you want to sum up anything? Maybe got a couple of minutes left.
I think that the big one for us is, if you are keen on investment property, the queues are gone at the houses and the showrooms. The developers are keen to sell, and they want buyers. You're sure the amount that you can afford is less than it would have been last year or the year before, but as long as you're a responsible spender and things, then they are lending. The banks are lending, so there doesn't seem to be a compelling reason not to buy. It's better than last year. You're not in a giant queue, so it is absolutely, in my opinion, still possible to buy, and potentially a better time to buy than this time last year. But particularly from a ease point of view. Yeah, Daniel.
I think the message for me is similar to last time that we did this same kind of chat, is just get advice, and don't be too narrow focused on yes, property is important, but it's part of an overall strategy, and that's what we'd shout from the rooftops all day long is make sure you've got a good core of advisors around you, and that property is part of a strategy, and when I say that, it's not only a retirement strategy, but it's also part of a strategy in terms of you understand the cash flows, you understand how much it's going to cost, you understand the return on your investment, so that you're making decisions on a big picture rather than, I like where that property is. Just get advice and do it the right way. That's what I would shout from the rooftops, and that now is a very, very good time to be looking at. And I got an email from a builder today, and is saying to me he reckons he's one of the only people that knows about this situation in terms of being able to do this particular type of build, and there's some good opportunities out there at the moment. So yeah, don't sit on your hands right now. It's not the time to be doing it. Yep.
Yeah. Gareth, you want to?
Yes. I'll just actually take the opportunity to briefly clarify a question that came up last time, and that is, does the second purchaser of a new build also get the benefit of a 5-year bright line period? And the answer is possibly yes and possibly no, depending on the situation. So if the second purchaser of a new build, if it's after, CCC is issued, and then the first purchaser buys that within 12 months of CCC being issued, Code of Compliance, then from the tax department's point of view, that is a new build with a 5-year bright line, right? And so then the second purchaser, they would have a 10-year bright line, i.e. they're buying it after that 5-year period. However, the interest will remain deductible 20 years from when the CCC is issued. So in that scenario, is the second purchaser of the new build, are they getting the benefit of a 5-year bright line? No, it'll be 10-year bright line, but interest is deductible. However, you do have some scenarios where a person might, and this is actually, if you want to find it, it's the IR 1227. And thanks to Phil for highlighting this. Somebody buys a house from a developer in May 22. It's issued with a CCC in April 22. It's then sold to someone else in January 23. Now let's imagine that the first purchaser, this is a family home, they sell the house within 5 years. They'd normally be clipped by a bright line, but they could claim the main home exclusion in this case. Now the second person has bought this within this period, they've acquired the new build no more than 12 months after the CCC was issued. So therefore the second purchaser now has 5-year bright line, and the third purchaser would have 10-year bright line. So in other words, there's not necessarily a straight answer to, does the second purchaser of a new build get the benefit of a 5-year bright line? It maybe is the best answer to that.
If I can jump in and confuse it even more, the banks to be exempt from the LVR restrictions, so to be able to borrow up to 80% for an investment build, not 60%, borrow up to 80%, you've got to be buying from the developer. So even if someone has owned it for a day and you're buying it off them, you're not exempt. So just bear that in mind.
And Rupert, is it right to say that in terms of the bank size, in terms of the LVR that they'll lend, it once it's got CCC, that's valid for 6 months? Is that right? 3 to 6 months?
No, there are because the first home loan has a different rule to the bank. I'm fairly confident the bank's 6 months, and first home loan, which we're not talking about tonight, is 12 months from CCC.
At which you've got a house sitting there and it hasn't been bought, and not that that's very common, but it's sitting there, got CCC, and you buy it 2 months later, so it's finished. You can still get that. Well, you can still get the 5-year bright line, and you can get the right LVR through the banks. It's exempt still from the bank's perspective.
As long as you're buying it from the developer, not from someone who's settling with the developer and buying it from them. Yeah, that's a key one to watch out for, because there will be some people who have put a contract down 18 months ago, come to settle and find they can't afford it, want to sell it because they've made $300,000 of equity by just holding the contract. But you wouldn't want to buy from those people if you're an investor and short on equity funds, because you won't get that 80% lending. So buy it from the developer if you're looking for that 80%.
And I'll just, while you're mentioning this sort of whole timing thing, because the bank's view and the IRD's view are different. So that's the point that you're highlighting there, Rupert, is if you've found that you've got a reduced borrowing capacity, even with some little bit of flexibility added to CCC FA version 2, right? It could be worth looking at a new build which is subject to 10-year bright line, i.e. it's got its CCC, say, in December 2020, So that means it's a new build. But by the time you come along, you're the second purchaser now, it's 10 years. Don't worry, you've got 10 years of 100% interest deductions. So there are properties out there that, in fact, just I think a couple of weeks ago, Daniel, you were working with some clients, and that's exactly what they were looking at with a smaller budget. So they're not obviously lying on the ground like people's at the beach, but they are out there.
Okay, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks very much. Awesome to get back together again and talk again soon. Thanks everyone for coming in.
Thank you.